What's good, everyone? This is Dr. Nee Darko. Make sure you hit the subscribe button below so that you're always up to date on the new uploads as well as alerts on this show. The other thing that you can do to help build this community is make sure you leave a comment below. Let us know what you like, what you don't like about the show, and ultimately, let us know who's winning these arguments, because I need to know that I'm beating Renee in these debates. Run the tape.
There was a Twitter post that came up.
This is a tweet back in 2024. Right? That says, how does anyone survive the time between medical school and residency financially? Why does everyone say just take out a relocation loan? That's not the answer to this recurrent problem in the medical world. Well, I'm sorry, Dr. Amos, that is your problem and you got to deal with it. So basically what happens, guys, if you're not familiar, if you're in med school and you don't understand what this person is talking about, this is someone who probably has already finished med school and is in residency, or someone who's about to go into it. The point is this: there is a gap. Once you match at a place, right? So this is around your fourth year of med school. Once you match at your training spot, right? So you match, I think around February, March, something like that. I don't know. There's a lag, right, of about 3 to 6 months where like you have to be able to now secure housing. You may need a car. You may need to do a whole bunch of different things in this new city while you're still living in your old place, right? Here's my example. So I was going to be doing my residency in Atlanta, Georgia. I still lived in Kansas City, Missouri, right? So I was a fourth year. I was living in Kansas City, Missouri. I matched in residency at Morehouse School of Medicine in Atlanta, Georgia. I was starting July, right? So now I got to find housing in Atlanta, which means I got to put down a security deposit, right? So depending on where you match at, that security deposit could be, a couple of stacks, right? Let's be honest, it's going to be a couple of stacks, right? 3,000 maybe. Then, you got to also come up with first month's rent, which is a stack, possibly maybe a stack and a half, right? Then, depending on the state of your car, you're going to need a car, or you may not need a car, or maybe your car may need to be fixed. You're going to have to move, right? I got to move from Kansas City to Atlanta, right? So I'm going to pack up the Jetta, with 120, 130,000 miles on it. Is it going to fit everything? I can't put a couch in there. Low key, I didn't have a couch in Atlanta or in Kansas City, right? But, there's things that I got to move and stuff, right? And remember, the way how I'm paying for med school, the way how I'm living for med school is off of a loan, a student loan, right? A refund check, right? The majority of that student loan went to go pay for my education, like tuition. And then whatever's left come back to me in a check. And that's how I pay my rent in med school. So the question is where are you finding this money to get that house or to get that apartment? All of these different things. And then not to mention, when you graduate from med school, you're probably graduating in May, right? Or June. So there's another month where it's like, what are you doing during that month of June as you start July? And then not to mention, don't forget, like when July 1st starts, when residency starts, you don't get a check July 1st. You might not even get a check July 15th. You might get a check like late in July. So that has been an age-old issue for decades, which is what do you do during that lag time? And lately, what people have been saying is take out what's called a relocation loan. And that could be like a private company where you go to like SoFi or whoever, and you go to that company and say, hey, yo, like I need a loan. Here's my credit score. Here's let me get like, 5 stacks so that I can do all these different things. And then you got to pay it back and go from there. Or, what I did is you put it on credit cards. Some people ask their family, hey, mom, dad, or, my rich uncle or Kiara, let me borrow some money, and then they do that and they pay them back. Or some people just, they know that as they're going into their fourth year of medical school, they're going to need a lot of money. So they take a higher amount of student loans, knowing that they'll take the tuition, but the rest of the money that they get as a refund, they'll use that to kind of build up their coffers so that when it's time to get ready for residency, they have something to go. They're all not optimal, So I don't know the perfect answer, but I do think the schools, it's the school's problem, I think, and they should really help the students out, and they should make it easy for students to get relocation loans at a very low interest rate. And I do know for a fact schools can do that. Like schools can create almost their own type of loan programs where they're saying, hey, we'll give you a $10,000 loan and we'll make it like 1%. We're not here to make money. And you can pay that back over, 5, 10 years and so forth. I think that's better. So I think that's the best
Realistically,
way.
do most of the loans, so I know you obviously have your student loans which you use to pay for your classes and whatnot. Um, the debt that you leave school with as a doctor, is that majority school related, or is that because you have expenses that aren't being covered?
Oh no, I mean, I think it's both, but the majority of it is your tuition, right? Like tuition, the majority of your student loans are going to pay tuition.
Okay.
Tuition is 60,000, 70,000. Some medical schools 90,000, right? Which means that you probably for let's say for a year, if your tuition is 90,000, that means you probably have to take out for that year maybe 110,000 or maybe 105,000, right? Because you'll need $15,000 to live, right? So you take that 15,000 divided by 2, and that will be what you'll use for rent, food, and all those different things. Get a computer, stethoscope, textbooks, things like that.
How likely is it that there are doctors that do choose to work in addition to going to school at the same
That
time?
happens, but I tell you, it's a small percentage. So if you look at the stats right now, the stats show that the majority of people who are in medical school right now come from very privileged backgrounds. The majority of people in school. Yeah. So I had a part-time job. I was in the study hall, right? And I would just stay there making sure that people like check in and check out, and it wasn't real. But like to have like a real like part-time job, that there's a notion in med school that if you're working in med school, like working like employed, gainfully employed, you're working your way out of med school, right? Because the amount of studying that you have to do is hella hard. Right. So if you have to put that on hold to go and do a part-time job or even a full-time job, or however you make it work, is going to be really tough. So what you normally see is people will do like a full-time job or a part-time job, maybe during the summer breaks.
Okay.
Or if they have a job, it's something that allows them to study. But the amount of information that is thrown, like Kiara, I'm not joking. Like the amount of information that's thrown at you over a 6-week span or however it may be, it's crazy. Like the not even textbook, like notes. I remember I had we would have papers, right? So the way how we did it, we studied based off of what we call systems, right? So the traditional med school curriculum is, all right, Kiara, you go to school and you're going to learn biochemistry, you're going to learn physics, you're going to learn chemistry, you're going to learn anatomy, and those are all like separate subjects. And you have to show mastery of that. And when you take a test, you're just taking a test on bio, and then you take a test on anatomy, and that's it, right? That's how
Mm-hmm.
you prove as you're moving through. What my med school did, which I think a lot more medical schools are doing now, and this is where I thrived, is let's relate all of that stuff to the human body. And that was a breakthrough for me. So for me, in college, I'm like, we're studying biochemistry, but I didn't really understand why it was important to understand biochemistry. Right. So you're trying to understand all of these reactions, but if you don't understand why you need to understand it, it makes it difficult to want to memorize it. So for us, it's like, well, the reason you need to understand this is how diabetes works. Or you as an athlete, you want to know why like your legs are burning at the end of a 400? That's biochemistry. This is the reaction that occurs while you're running. This is the reaction that occurs when you don't take your medications for diabetes. Do you see what I'm saying? So
Mm-hmm.
when they started doing that, it was just like, what? Yes, I understand this now. This makes so much sense, right? So when we study, let's say we're going to study the kidneys. Well, we study the anatomy of the kidneys. We understand the pathology, right? So what can go bad with the kidneys? We understand all these different things with the kidneys, and the amount of papers that we would get, like, would stack up binders like this thick. You can't close the binders, right? And that's a section. And then you do it times 12, right? You do the neuro, you do the kidneys, you do the cardiovascular, you do all these different things, like just stacks of information that you have to all understand. At the end of 6 weeks, you take a test and all that stuff. It's crazy. So to imagine having to study all that stuff and rinse and repeat all that stuff, imagine there's people who have families, kids, and then you throw on top of that, some people may have jobs. Like, I don't know how they do it. It's tough. It's real
I'm
tough.
actually wondering now. So because and I'm not calling you out on your age or anything. I'm saying that things are different now, right? So everything is easier, in my opinion, right? Because I could just, instead of carrying around binders, now I could just create folders or sections, whether it's on my, Google Drive, Microsoft Notes, or whatever. Um, how, and I'm hoping a listener can answer, but how do you think they study now? Is it like a control find thing? Like if I'm looking for a specific thing that I need to really focus on, can I just control find it? Because
Yeah, I mean,
before
I
it
think
was you're writing your notes.
yeah, yeah, I think there's still a small segment of people who write their notes, but I think the majority of everything is electronic now. The
Yeah,
question though is, there's studies that show that when you look at something on a screen, like, do you retain that as much as when you actually are physically reading on a piece of paper?
absolutely not for me.
Yeah, for me, the same thing. So that's one thing that they have to deal with. But yeah, like they're not lugging around these big folders anymore, right? Like everything is on an iPad or digitally. And then like how do you keep notes accurately, right? Like how do you highlight? It's just it's the resources are different, but I think the stakes are just as high. And one thing that they have now that we didn't have before is the amount of electronic resources that they have now to either test themselves, communicate with other people is just ridiculous, right? Like the tests that they have to test their knowledge. There's so many more tests that are available. There's so many more resources electronically that can help them understand the body systems and how the body works. It's really um, it's phenomenal. I'm really happy for them actually for that because I think it's better than how it was for us where we had to figure it out.
Hmm.
So I think it's really good. I think you're going to get really well trained doctors now because now they can understand the full scope of things because there's so many different ways to test your knowledge. So the question though is, you know, how do you retain a lot of stuff? And I think just in general of education, you know, like if you go to a college campus, like there's college professors who are saying that like because they don't have books anymore or because they don't really write essays anymore, like the level of education or their understanding of the students' understanding is going down, but the students don't recognize that. And I just think there's certain things that you just have to go through that I think we don't let students go through and they're missing out on it. And I do think writing stuff down and having to write an essay written out or even just typed out with your thoughts, there's something to be said about that. There's this certain amount of work that goes into that you can't replicate, but that could just be me saying get off my lawn.
No, I don't know. I'm not that far behind you, but I agree. I do find it a little easier for me to write things out versus type them out. I feel like I understand it a little bit better. My
Hmm.
brain takes, it's easier for my brain to process it as I write it in my words.